Welcome to As I Live and Grieve, a podcast that tells the truth about how hard this is. We're glad you joined us today. We know how hard it is to lose someone you love and how well-intentioned friends and family try so hard to comfort us. We created this podcast to provide you with comfort, knowledge, and support. We are grief advocates, not professionals, not licensed therapists. We are you. Today we are speaking with Paula Becker. Paula is the author of A Little Book of Self-Care for Those Who Grieve, A House on Stilts, Mothering in the Age of Opioid Addiction, Looking for Betty MacDonald, The Egg, the Plague, Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle and I, and co-author of The Future Remembered, the 1962 Seattle World's Fair and Its Legacy, and Alaska-Yukon-Pacific Exposition, Washington's First World's Fair. Paula Becker has written for HistoryLink.org since 2001. Her 300-plus essays on the site document all aspects of Washington state history.
Hi, everyone. I want to give a special welcome to our guest today, Paula Becker. Paula has written a delightful book that actually would make the best, and I mean that sincerely, the best, all uppercase, the best, little gift to give a friend of yours who might have lost someone or who may just still be grieving after a period of time. And we're going to talk about this book. I may even read a page or two because some pages have truly just one word.
And Christmas is coming, everyone, so get
very
those
good,
gifts
Stephanie.
ordered early.
Very good. Very good. So before we start into our discussion, Paula, I want to give you a moment and ask if you would please give our listeners a little bit of your background.
Sure, I would be glad to. I am coming to you from my home here in Seattle. I write about Washington state history and have written a couple of books about World's Fairs. I've written a biography of the author Betty MacDonald, whose most famous book was The Egg and I, a worldwide bestseller in 1945, still in print continuously in many different languages. And then I also have written a memoir called A House on Stilts, Mothering in the Age of Opioid Addiction, which tells the story of my relationship with my eldest son, Hunter, over the 10 years that he suffered from drug addiction, heroin addiction, battled with that, and culminating in his death, not from an overdose, but in 2017. And that led up to me as a person who, as a writer and obviously a reader, kind of desperately grabbing for books that would help me understand how to get through this grief that was engulfing me. And there were a lot of books, there's some good grief books out there, but I felt like too many words, it's just like too much stuff on the page, and my eyes wouldn't do it. My brain wouldn't do it. And I thought sort of at the time, there should be a book that feels like a children's book in terms of you only have a few words on each page. The pictures let you rest your eyes and that help people in the earliest days of grief. And I wasn't able to find one. So eventually that was the book that I wrote.
Right. Well, there is a quote that if you look on the shelf and you can't find the book you want, you should sit down and write it. So you did just that. This book, as Paula says, she wanted it to kind of feel like a children's book. When she said the word feels, this book brought me so much emotion, yet at the same time, so much comfort. Because I felt someone else really understands the pain and how devastating this can be. So I have to just read you that these are the first 2 pages, all right? And the title of the book is A Little Book of Self-Care for Those Who Grieve. Someone is gone, and they will not come back. I had to stop after I read that. 2 pages, people. 2 pages. That hit me with such impact that I stopped. And it was about an hour later, I picked up the rest of the book, and the next page is a very soft picture, a photo of a door. Looking out the door, you see a tree, but it doesn't really look desolate. You just know that you're looking out toward something, and maybe you can't really see what you want to. And then, as if that's not enough, the very next page says, weep, scream, hate, disbelieve, go numb. And the reader can sit there and just take one word at a time and get all the feels. Paula, you hit the nail on the head with this book. I have to tell you.
It's so good to hear you say that, Kathy. And I have to say my number one reason for writing this book was that I wanted people in grief to feel that their grief was seen.
Well, yes. And you know how it is too. Sometimes when you're grieving, you get through the funeral, you get through the calling hours, the funeral, whether it's a memorial celebration or whether it's just a light dinner, luncheon or something after the ceremony that, you invite people to, and there's dish to pass and everything. And you get through all that and then you're home. Chances are you may be home alone unless you have children or other family around you, but you may be home alone. And it is so hard in your head to figure out what you're doing, what you need to think next. There's just so many things in your head, in your mind. And this book will just help you bring all of those emotions out one word at a time.
I think that, not to interrupt you, but to build on that, I feel like so many times in early grief, we're just crawling toward that next thing that we absolutely have to do. So if you're going to have a memorial, that can take some of that scattered energy and focus it. And you think, okay, I have to do this. I have to call a caterer. I have to call, a minister or however you're going about it. And then that happens. And the next day you wake up and they're still dead.
Yeah.
And they're still dead. And your project is done and they're still dead. And you have to keep, sitting with that fact. That fact doesn't go away. And so that to be a hand to hold for someone who was starting to sink in that this loss was permanent, that felt like something really important.
Exactly. And we talk about self-care a lot on our podcasts. And to a lot of people, if you ask them what self-care means, they might say, oh, go get a pedicure. Okay. I mean, that's pretty good too.
Sure. If that helps. Yeah.
Go get your hair done. Go get some retail therapy, as Stephanie and I like to call it. There are a lot of things you can do in that vein. And yes, it will help to kind of distract you and make you happy for a little bit. And you may even find yourself laughing. But as soon as you get back home again, there you are in that same quiet space with all the memories in the world, and you're kind of trapped again. So for all of our listeners, please know that self-care also means helping yourself move through this journey, not just stay permanently in one place. It takes time, yes. And sometimes you kind of stay in one place for a little while, but eventually you need to kind of try something else. So these little these single words that Paula has on these pages, for me, were very helpful in that manner. It was like a guide. All right, so now for the moment, I'm just going to cry. That's all.
Right.
I think it's really important too, that part of what I'm doing is giving, gentle and simple suggestions, but always with the caveat, if this feels right, or if this is what you need, because I didn't want to write a kind of book that says, okay, here's the checklist for dealing with your grief, A, B, C, and then you're done. No, the idea is that you have permission to do whatever feels right for you that moment, as long as that's not going to hurt you. And sometimes that is that at the very last minute, those well-meaning friends who've said to you, we want to go on a walk, we want to support you, and you've said, okay, and then 10 minutes before they're to show up, you think, I can't do this.
Right.
And self-care can be allowing yourself to text them and say, I am really sorry, my grief is flaring and I can't do this today. I know you love me, and we'll do it again another day.
Right. Right.
You know.
We have to put ourselves first at that point.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Paula, if you did this intentionally or not, but I noticed a little pattern in your book that I read the page, weep, scream, hate, disbelieve, go numb. They were all on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
Yet the next page, breathe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you intended that these negative emotions and the ones that are really so hard and everything, do those. Don't dwell on them. Do them. But then you get to breathe. Take some time for that.
Yeah, those things come to different people. Like, not everybody is going to scream. Some people are going to do the opposite. They might go numb. But I think the important thing is that in the earliest days, you really just have one job, which is to keep breathing. You don't have to brush your teeth. It's more difficult if you have to care for a child. And I'm not at all dismissing that. Of course, I'm simplifying this, but at the very bottom of the very bottom, your job is just to keep sucking the oxygen in and breathing it out. That's your job.
Right. Now, how hard was it as a writer, someone who's used to maybe a commitment of 1,000 words or a goal of 1,000 words, to really limit yourself, and knowing that limit, search for just the right word?
That's a really good question, Kathy. And I'll tell you, this book, in the introduction, I say that it started as thoughts written down, on sleepless nights or in the aftermath of painful dreams. And it really did. I would get up if I couldn't sleep. And sometimes I would have a phrase in my head, and it could just be 2 words or 8 words. And I would write that down. And I just kept doing that. And as I was driving, sometimes a phrase would come to me. And eventually I had, a basket full of a bunch of little pieces of paper. And then I really did start arranging them and seeing, where there were holes. And so it wasn't hard because I wasn't pressing myself, but I felt from the very beginning that this was a book that needed to exist. It was, you want all your books to exist. You're really happy when they're published. You love seeing them in the bookstore and the library. But with this book, I thought this needs to be in people's hands. This book needs to be doing the work of comforting people and helping them to feel seen. And so because of that, it wasn't hard because I knew I didn't want it to be big and long. I wanted it to be short. So
Right.
I like how it's short and simple, and it's almost like just 1 or 2 words. It's like you're giving them permission to feel what they need to feel and just let it out. And then they're remembering, breathe, I think that I love that. And you're right, what you said earlier, Paula, about pages and pages. Here's the checklist. Here's what you do. And all these words and sentences, it's just too much when you're in it so deep.
Right.
And the simple words, I think, again, you're giving it permission. And it reminded me, Mom, we've spoken on the podcast with a lot of writers and talking about journaling and writing prompts. I feel like, Paula, your book is grief prompts. It's almost like, those short words. It's like, okay, I'm gonna let it out. I'm just gonna feel the feelings and then move on. That's what I think of it.
I think the idea that, what I'm really doing, especially early with those, just a couple of words on each page, I'm trying to be a mirror. I'm just trying, because people think it's wrong that I feel like screaming. Well, it's not wrong that you feel like screaming, and it's okay to do that. But I think that people, it's not that I have to give people permission, but I think some people feel reassured that they're not the only one who feels that way. And if it's in a book, then they're not the only one.
Yeah,
that's right.
And I think they feel like they shouldn't feel that way, or maybe even if it's 5-10 years later, I still shouldn't be feeling this way. Well, yes, you can. It's
Right.
still, it was part of your life. This person was part of your life somehow.
Right.
And you can still grieve that,
And you don't have to, you shouldn't judge yourself, and you don't have
Right.
to have a reason for why, 4, 5, 10 years down the road, you walk into, a store and all of a sudden the person it just hits you, your grief again. You don't always know why.
Right.
But to say, wow, I feel that,
Yeah.
to just let it be recognized.
Mm-hmm.
I think that helps us to be able to move more freely within our world if we're not denying something that's happening in us.
Right.
Yeah.
Even at one point in the book, you mentioned it's a cautionary statement. I'm not going to read it word for word because I'm not going to give our listeners everything. They're going to have to go get it. But you caution and you tell people to be careful because you are in shock.
Yeah.
And I can just picture somebody thinking, oh my gosh, that's true. I am in shock. And maybe they hadn't thought of it in that perspective at that point. But then as they start to realize that, it may give them a whole different view of their grief and things they might need to do.
Yes. Yeah.
One of my favorite books on grief is by Megan Devine. It's Okay That You're Not Okay. And there are tons of words in that book. But what I liked, I took it almost paragraph by paragraph. It was a very conversational book, and I felt like she was just having a conversation with me. And she was certainly mirroring a lot of my emotions and feelings and thoughts as well.
Yes.
And your book is similar, but I love the simplicity of it. I just truly do. Not photos, they're pictures, they're drawings are beautiful. Now, you did not do those, correct?
No, I didn't do them, but I really, and I wish that the people that listening to this podcast could see the images. I hope that you'll go to a bookstore and look at it, or go online and look at some of the images that are posted, because I am not the level of artist that could produce, watercolors for a book. I mean, I dabbled, but I knew some of the moods that I wanted, and even specifically some kind of, images that I could give to the illustrator as a prompt. So I took a lot of photographs of things that belonged to me.
Okay.
Took pictures of, like, there's an illustration of a Buddha. That's something that I have at my house, and like my own jewelry, a tattoo, a memorial tattoo. These all end up in the book, but they're, rendered in these beautiful watercolors by an artist named Rebecca Nichols, who is based in Austin. I haven't met her, but I'm so, so grateful, because it really does. The art supports the whole idea that this book it's dealing with such hard stuff, but that it is doing it in a gentle way, and that the pictures give your eyes something to rest on. And I think that's so important,
Right. And then there's another section in the book that gave me pause. You spoke about yoga, and Stephanie, you'll relate to this one. And you talked about a particular pose in yoga called Savasana, I believe is the name. I'm not sure I pronounced it correctly, but you said it's also called the corpse pose. And I thought, ooh, that doesn't sound good. So I looked it up on Google, my favorite place to go. I looked it up, and it told me that is usually the pose that's done at the very end of your yoga session, when you just lie flat on the floor on your back. Now, Stephanie,
that's my
what
favorite
was your response?
pose.
It's everybody's favorite pose. And there are I have been in yoga classes where someone says at the beginning of the class to the teacher, I'm having a really hard day. I'm just going to be in Savasana the whole class. Okay. And of course, the yoga, they are like, yes, whatever. I offer you be in Savasana the whole class. But when I wrote that, I knew that was a really hard, that's very stark. It's a stark way to put it. And my husband is always my first reader on everything. And he read that, and he was like, whoa, like, ow, but the thing is, I was basing that on all the yoga that I did after Hunter was killed, and remembering lying there in Shavasana in its darkened studio with tears just silently streaming out of my eyes until my ears were full of tears. I would have to tip my head over. And I thought, you know what? Part of it is that you are in that position, that you are touching the earth, and it's a strong, strong place of healing. And so I wanted that to be there.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's great. Now I know how to pronounce it correctly. But I also think it's a difficult pose because we're not used to just relaxing.
Nope.
How difficult is it sometime if the power is out and you can't watch TV and you don't have lights to read a book and you can't use your phone for one reason? Here we are forced in this isolation, really, and it's so difficult.
Yeah.
So that's what that pose kind of makes me think of too, that you're to lie there on the ground on your back and just do nothing, just be
There's
there.
also, child's pose, which is often how yoga classes start. And that's in the book too. And as a sort of bookend to that, because in child's pose, you are down like the way, a 2-year-old might sleep, with their knees all pulled up. And it's a very private place where no one is seeing your face. And that is also a very powerful place to focus on what you're feeling,
Yeah. So there's just some very powerful words and images.
The first time, you know me, I'm wound tight. Okay. Let's be honest here. And for me to relax, but I think the whole mentality of yoga and meditation, because I was like, oh, I'm going to laugh. I can't be quiet like that. I can't relax. But it was fantastic. And usually your instructor, there's soft music in the background, which helps, but your instructor just has like this soft monotone voice. And if you just really concentrate on that, and when they're telling you to feel you touching the ground, to feel being part of it, it just makes you feel things deeper, and it actually does help you relax. So if anyone out there hasn't tried it yet, try it. There's free apps and free things out there for 10 minutes, even just try it and just really let go of everything.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it doesn't, I totally agree with you, Stephanie. But I will also say it doesn't have to be yoga. I think the important thing about yoga for me is that it helps me to practice being present in the present moment, right?
Yeah.
And you're not doing your list. But there are other things that do that too. And one of the things that I talk about is just being in nature, feeling just the air on your skin and the ground under your feet. That's good medicine. And it's something that is free and anybody can have it. You don't have to plan ahead for it or get a babysitter or any of those things. You can walk out and you can say, I'm concentrating on how that sun feels on my face. Everything in my life is really hard right now. I'm really sad. I miss my person horribly, but the sun feels good on my face and that's okay. I'll take that. That's something.
And sit and do that for 15, 30 minutes if you can. Like that's just your own personal peace, and that's the self-care. Like exactly. It's not like, like us as moms. I read something recently like, oh, we feel like going to the grocery store by ourselves with no kids is self-care. No, that's doing normal life. That's not taking care of yourself. So realize those differences and just be in the moment and literally take care of yourself for a minute.
And what is self-care for each person is what feels like self-care to them.
Right.
So it might be that being in the grocery store does feel like self-care to someone who is able to just let everything else go, and they're concentrating on, who knows, the colors of the cans. Or, I mean, I think that there's a lot of different ideas in a little book of self-care for those that grieve, and none of them are going to work for everybody. Right. I'm hoping that a couple will work for, anyone who reads the book, and that it's also just the idea of noticing things that might be helpful and letting yourself try them. And you don't have to commit to it. You can try it. And if it like, there's some strange things that I felt compelled to do in the first year of my grief. And this is going to sound really strange, but like I had at the time very curly hair, and hair that I would wash it, scrunch it up, put product in it and go. I never brushed my hair because if I brushed it, it turned into a big, giant mop.
Right.
But somehow I felt like I had to buy a hairbrush and I had to feel the feeling of the bristles going across my scalp. I hadn't done that in 15 or 20 years, but I was like, okay, grief, I'm going to do this. And I don't know why. And I did it and it felt really good. And I didn't have to do it for very long, but there was something in me, like somatic thing that needed that, and that it helped me with my grief. I don't know what it means, but I'm just offering that if there's something like that you're like, oh, that's crazy, surely that won't help. It might not, but it doesn't hurt to try.
Right.
And now I have a hairbrush. So
yeah. Sometimes it's the littlest detail,
Right.
that will make a difference.
yeah.
But yes, and you are right. We've said on a lot of our podcasts too that everybody's grief is different. It's as unique as our fingerprints are.
That's right.
It depends on who we lost, how long we knew them, what kind of a relationship we had, and the fact that just everybody is different. So sometimes you just have to look at some suggestions. One will strike you and you think, oh, let me give that a try. That sounds okay.
Yep.
But again, know that self-care means more than just doing something for 1 second that may make you feel good. And don't allow yourself to feel guilty or selfish for doing it.
Right.
Think of it as it's part of healing. You have to heal yourself.
Yeah.
And if you don't take care of yourself, then your grief journey is going to be more difficult, more challenging, and it's going to take a lot longer to get to the point where you feel like, all right, I can manage this. And you'll note I didn't say get over it, because I don't believe you ever get over it.
No.
I am convinced I will grieve for the rest of my life.
Yep.
That's just the way it is. It will change. I will adapt. Things will change. Right now, I am very, very happy in my life. And 4 years ago, before my husband died, I never would have thought I would be able to return to that level of happiness. But it's different. It's different. But that self-care, you have to do that. It's got to be part of it. It's got to be part of your prescription, whatever it means to you.
And the other thing is that, and I don't know if you felt this way or not, but it was a real grace thing for me that immediately, almost after Hunter was killed, I felt how many other people in the world were grieving. I physically felt like I had, laid down on water, like if you're going to float on your back.
Right.
I felt the buoyancy of other people's grief all around me in a way. And it wasn't like anybody said to me, oh, we're all grieving too. It was like, I felt it. And I think that we get to be sort of hypersensitive in that early grief time. And that to me, somebody that might find that not comforting, but to me, I was like, oh, I'm not alone. Other people are grieving, and they always are, and they always have been, and they always will be. This is not abnormal. It's a new thing for me, but it is not abnormal.
Right. And lastly, in the book, you can tell I love this book.
Thank you.
My very, very favorite page happens to be page 98. And it just says simply, know that we all, in time, walk this road. And that's true. For those that haven't experienced grief yet, I'm not going to say you're lucky. I'm not going to say just wait. You will, at some point, feel a very devastating grief. And I know that every single person has already had grief in their life. It may
Right.
not be from a death of a loved one. It might be from a divorce. It may be from a job that didn't pan out, or a layoff, or even things that happened during the pandemic. It's all grief. I'm even convinced that one of the reasons the world is in such chaos now is because there are so many people grieving,
Yeah.
and they
Agreed.
just cannot get a grip, so to speak.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
any rate.
And they probably don't realize that they're grieving. I think the
No,
first instance,
no.
I mean, we've talked about it before. The first instance is if you're grieving, people always assume it's someone in your life has died. Well, that's not just
Right.
it. It's other things.
Right.
It's other
Exactly.
other types of
Right.
losses. So I think
Right.
that the
Right.
people just aren't realizing that they have
Right.
grief.
Yeah.
Right. And I go back to Dr. Bill's very simple definition that grief is merely an unwanted reaction to an unfortunate incident,
Mhm.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? But at any rate, listeners, you gotta buy this book.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, you gotta buy it. Whether you buy it for yourself, pass it around to all your
Yeah.
friends, whether you buy it as a gift, but you have to buy this book.
I want to say too, and I appreciate that so much. And I really hope that people will feel like this is something they can put into someone else's hands, because there are times when even those of us who talk about grief all the time and write about grief and are comfortable with grief, when we have a bereaved person, sometimes we don't know what to say either, because
That's right.
that's normal. That's natural.
That's right.
I also want to say, so I hope that this book is given to people. The giving is part of the medicine of the book, in my opinion. But also, I will say that there is a wonderful, wonderful audio recording that an audio actor, Heather Henderson, has made, and it's available on all the different platforms. And of course, it's short because the book is short. But I have a feeling that that's the kind of thing that some people might find themselves playing when they can't sleep at night. And it doesn't have pictures, obviously, but it conveys the comfort of the book, and it has the additional added benefit of someone is reading it to you, which I think is comforting in a deep, deep way.
Yeah. Well, now I have to go check my Audible account, see if I can get it there, just so I can hear the words.
Well, and I wanted to say quick before we go is I'm purchasing the book, the self-care book for grief, and I'm going to send it to someone who I know recently lost her daughter.
Oh.
And she has all of her grandkids.
Oh, dear.
Now I'm going to break down. But I also bought your other book for myself. So people, go right into Amazon and put those in your cart, okay?
Thank you. And if you like them, please post reviews, because that really, really does help.
Okay.
You know, it makes a real difference, and people look for that.
You post
So
the reviews on Amazon? Is that what is best?
Yeah.
Okay.
you can do that, or if you're in, there's lots of other book, buying any of them, however you buy it, or even just walking into your independent bookstore and saying, I love this book. You guys should carry it. If you don't carry it,
Yeah.
I do that all the time at Liftbridge and Brockport. They get tired of seeing me. I'm going to suggest
this lady
another
again.
Yeah.
I'm guessing if you come in there often, they do not get tired of you.
I know,
they love you.
They really don't. They really don't. They're delightful. Well, unfortunately, Paula, it's time to wrap up for today. And I know you've spoken directly to our listeners about some things, but we want to give you a few moments to speak to our audience and just convey anything you would like. Tell them, maybe about, I don't know if there's future books coming, anything at all you would like them to hear from you. This is your message without me primarily interrupting you with questions.
Well, I want to thank both of you, Kathy and Stephanie, for having me on this podcast and giving me a chance to talk about a little book of self-care for those who grieve. And I think what I would say to the listeners is, if you're feeling grief, owning it is something that sometimes can help, and, not turning from it because it's there. And I hope the book is a comfort to you if you are grieving. And I hope that if you have someone that you care about who is in grief, that the book will help them too. I don't have a future project right now because I really feel like I'm trying to be Johnny Appleseed for this grief book and spread the word. And I'm a huge believer in word of mouth. So if you hear this and you tell somebody else about it, then you're helping. And if you buy a copy for someone, you're helping. And, and including getting your library to have it. I love my books in libraries. That's actually almost more thrilling than anything else is to see, because you know how many people are going to get to read it. So
absolutely. Well, I will start my own private little campaign out here in this corner of the world. And we do have an international audience as well. So people around the globe that listen to this podcast will hear about your book.
Marvelous.
And, we would like it to spread so widely everywhere. I think it's delightful. I would almost like to see funeral homes give it as a gift.
That would be amazing.
So, and we happen to know a few funeral directors as well that I am going to make mention of this book too. So, because we've had them as guests on our podcast. So we have to wrap it up for today. Again, Paula, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for the words on the pages in your book and the illustrations as well. It is, I'm just going to say it again, listeners, it is the best book that you could possibly have for yourself. And it's the best book that you can just quietly give to someone who is starting their journey in grief. Remember self-care, and this book will do it. I have to tell you, can't say it enough. So remember self-care, take care of yourselves. It's very, very important. Go ahead, Paula.
Just thanking you so much. Thank you for getting the book, and thank you for by getting, I mean understanding and for helping to spread the word. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. I'm so delighted that our paths crossed.
I have to interject again. I know we were trying to end this, but when you find out that someone has passed, you tend to get a card and mail a card. This would be a perfect thing to do. Buy this book, write a little message inside the book to them, and mail that to them. I feel like they're going to get so much more from this book instead of a card.
And if you look at the price of cards, usually cards kind of eventually get thrown away.
Yeah.
This book won't.
No.
If they don't keep it themselves, it will get passed on. It's that type of thing. So that was a great idea, Stephanie. It doesn't cost much more than some of the greeting cards on the shelf.
And they'll get so much more out of it.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And you yourself giving it as a gift, I think will get more out of it as well.
Right. Yeah.
So, all right, we really have to try.
I know.
To end
okay,
this. Paula,
self-care, everybody.
I know it's a great conversation. Everyone, take care of yourselves, and we'll love to have you back for our next episode as we all continue to live and grieve.
Thank you so much for listening with us today. Do you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, or do you have a question from one of our episodes? Please email us at info@asiliveinGrieve.com and let us know. We hope you will find a moment to leave a review, send an email, and share with others. Join us next time as we continue to live and grieve together.